Good morning, everyone. Be just a moment before we get started. For those that are here early, I have a temporary background after everything that's happened over the last week or two with the crows and all the press. This is artwork based on a poster created by a politician and artist out of Berkeley called Alfred II. I thought it was actually a really good rendition for crows and for downtown Sunnyvale. So it's an altered poster, but yeah, I was actually pretty impressed by his piece of artwork. So those of you that have actually been able to join this a little bit early today are in for that treat. We'll get rid of this background in just a moment. I think it's been an interesting week, to say the least, as far as being mayor and all the different things that you have to deal with as far as mayor is concerned. So it's been a good week, but crows have been what I thought was going to be a relatively slow week. Crows have kept me very busy, from emails and phone calls and interviews over the last week or so. But we'll get rid of that. We'll go ahead and get rid of the background. We'll come back to it maybe at a future meeting. But we'll go to our standard background here before we get started. If you have any questions, any comments, please add them to this feed, and we'll go ahead and get started in just a second. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week. I hope everyone's had a good long weekend last weekend, and this is the 97th installment of my weekly office hours. I hope everyone's being healthy and enjoying the new year. We have now reached 676 days since the March 16, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. And we went through a roller coaster over the last year and a half, 2 years. 22 months ago, I converted my weekly coffee shop hours into these weekly virtual office hours. This live stream address is really good for me because it allows me to kind of look back on the last few weeks. And then people say they enjoy hearing from their mayor, and it allows me to give you some updates, some news, some ideas of upcoming events, and also, just allows me to answer some of your questions and just provide some general words of encouragement. I'm now following up, of course, this virtual office hours with in-person office hours at Being Seen on Murphy Avenue. So if you have any questions, any comments, you can always put them into the chat here, or you can actually meet me in person. So email me to reserve 15 minutes or 30 minutes, or just drop in if you have a quick question. But I just want to thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale. About 7 months ago, I began changing my background art with work provided by Sunnyvale artists from the Sunnyvale Art Club. Today's piece is called West. It is a piece by Melissa Medina. And if you want to purchase this piece of art, just reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with the artist. But let's go ahead and get started and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Let's see, it's been fairly calm 2 weeks, except for stories of the crows, of course. But last Monday, Governor Newsom unveiled his $286 billion budget proposal. That's about 9% larger than last year. And it's also based upon, a strong economic recovery, tax revenues that continue to roll in higher than that was anticipated. And of course, additional federal funds the state is getting. So all that is good for us, from residents of California. Governor Newsom's administration projects about a $21 billion surplus for 2022, 2023, plus tens of billions of dollars in extra cash for schools, pension payments, reserve accounts, all that. Governor Newsom's budget proposal really doubles down on a lot of funding for multiple things, but one of which is the high-speed rail project in San Joaquin Valley. It expands the state's initiative also to replace gas-powered vehicles with zero-emission vehicles. There's, about $9 billion that would go towards transportation infrastructure. And all that is really to focus on reducing the state's greenhouse gas emissions. So this budget also is kind of just as a wish list. We'll see how, it starts going into negotiations this month, and has to be finalized by June. So it's that negotiations between the governor and the state legislator as far as finalizing that 2022-2023 budget. Newsom also asked that the legislature act quickly to approve about half the money as emergency assistance in the current financial year. So basically, because we know that we're going to have a surplus, go ahead and start spending some of that on, additional staff for testing and vaccination capacity, additional testing overall. And so we'll see how quickly the budget supplementals come back to us, but ultimately a lot of the state programs did expire last year. So like paid sick leave program for workers that have tested positive for COVID-19. And so we'll see how quickly that can go through the legislature. And then last Tuesday, the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors met. And I attended most of that meeting. I don't normally set aside my Tuesdays to meet, but and watch their meetings. But I joined mainly to speak on several items that were coming in front of them. Several things of interest. First, the supervisors approved teacher housing in Palo Alto, which this is a collaborative effort between multiple school districts in the county to build permanent teacher housing. And so it's the Fremont Union School District, it's other school districts, Foothill De Anza, putting in funds to help fund permanent housing for teachers. So happy to see that move forward. They also, there's also a resolution declaring a mental health and substance abuse public health crisis in Santa Clara County. So that was a referral from Supervisor Ellenberg and Supervisor Lee. So I was happy to see that. Ultimately, the county will bring back a report with options to consider what county can do as far as what actions the county can take to advance like a coordinated response for mental health and substance abuse needs in our county. And, looking at especially the last year, it's been very, very difficult for a lot of residents. And, it's only highlighted the issues of health and mental health especially. So I was happy to see that come forward. And then lastly, the supervisors approved a referral from Supervisor Semidian to basically, there'll be something coming back January 25th, so next Tuesday, on options to provide at-home COVID testing for Santa Clara County residents. And we'll be talking a little bit more later about at-home testing. Last Thursday evening, there was a joint meeting between Sunnyvale City Council and our Sunnyvale Redistricting Commission. So we reviewed maps, we got some public input, and then we had some general discussions on on what council would like to see from those redistricting maps. And then that redistricting commission, so that meeting went to about 11 p.m. And then they came back Friday, and I sat in on most of that meeting and started at around, I think, 6 p.m., 5 or 6 p.m., and then went to 11 p.m. again. So I want to thank the redistricting commission for all their hard work, but they ended up reducing it down to 3 maps with several variations and several questions that staff had to come back to. They met again last night to take additional input from residents and get some feedback from staff as far as some of the questions they had. So overall, it was fairly positive. Definitely, there's still some chance for you to give your public input if you're interested. So ultimately, there's an upcoming meeting that I'll be talking about later. Monday, of course, was Martin Luther King Day. I had several events that day, but Martin Luther King was really an inspiration to many, many people in this nation. And his words continue to resonate, especially on the concept of service. And I know that there were multiple days of service for events throughout the county for helping out in your community, whether or not it's planting trees or cleaning up, trash or some of the creeks. So there are lots of opportunities to give back in the community. So I was very proud to see that multiple of our residents, out doing that. From a Sunnyvale standpoint, we've had many unity events over the last few years to basically bring our residents together in response to whatever has been happening at a national or local level. And a lot of those unity events are really built around Dr. King's words about, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And that has been, one of the big things for the core of our unity events, going back to the hate crime that we had several, almost 3 years ago in our city now, through Black Lives Matter, anti-Asian hate, all of that. It's important, there's a unity in Sunnyvale, and it's our diversity that really brings us stronger. And, a lot of the words of Dr. King, resonate really closely to me. So happy to always celebrate that. On Tuesday, every home in the U.S. became eligible to order 4 free at-home COVID-19 tests, and that's per residential address. But it's now a government website, so you can now go online if you haven't already and order up to 4 COVID tests. And I think that is the standard quantity, regardless of how many fewer or more people you might have in your household. So you go to COVID tests, tests.gov, and you enter all of your information, and the United States Postal Service will be delivering that to your door. Governor, last month, President Biden announced that the government would buy, 1 billion tests and make them available to people in the U.S. for free. So the first 500 million of those tests were available online, and it was supposed to start on Wednesday. They had the website working about a day early, and so there was a big push and lots of publicity throughout the week, because a lot of people want to get tested. The Omicron virus, the Omicron variant is really very virulent. It's very transmissible to a large degree, and you'll see, we'll talk about our COVID numbers a little bit later, but it's throughout the country, throughout the world, especially, you'll see our California numbers and what the daily counts are. It's pretty amazing. And then on Wednesday, Governor Newsom was in LA, where he joined the Union Pacific representatives and law enforcement and Caltrans crews at the Union Pacific Railroad area. And there's been lots of photos on TV, in the newspaper over the last week or so about, what the amount of crime and break-ins in the trains and kind of, packages and items strewn about the rail yard. So that spike in thefts really made a lot of news. And so Governor Newsom announced kind of a multi-agency effort to first clean up that railway, where Caltrans crews will be helping the Union Pacific in that rail yard area. And then the governor also highlighted the state's efforts to combat theft and basically hold the perpetrators accountable. So the Highway Patrol will continue its efforts coordinated with local law enforcement to basically prevent theft on our railways, in Los Angeles and around the state. So that was good. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. The Omicron variant continues to spread across the nation. From a national standpoint, we've now reached 68.3 million cases. That's increased by 5.2 million in the last week. That was, 5.5 million from the week previous, and 5 million. So it's been about 5 million every week, new cases every week for the last 3 weeks. So it's just crazy. Nationally, we've had over 250 million vaccinated with at least one dose. So that's the positive thing. That's over 87% of our adults have at least one dose, and 73% of our adults, so about 3/4 of our adults are fully vaccinated. So, all that is positive. We do have people still passing away with COVID. So we've had 856,000 deaths. That's another 14,000 people just in the last week. And from a California standpoint, we've now had almost 7 million positive cases. So, that is rapidly growing up in the last few weeks. We're now over 108,000 new cases a day for people testing positive with COVID-19. That's up from, so it's 108 a day now. It was 79,000 a day last week. It was 36,000 a day 2 weeks ago. So, we've more almost tripled the number of cases a day just in the last few weeks. So, and from a positivity standpoint, we're testing a lot more people, but about 21% of those tested are testing positive. So it's showing how transmissible that new variant ultimately is. We can continue having people dying with COVID-19. We've had over 77,000 fatalities in California, another 800 in the last week. And, on the positive note, we're getting vaccines to everyone. We've had over 68 million vaccines administered. That's another million in the last week. And we're still hanging out at number 10 with states with at least one shot, about 81%. And then with residents with at least one shot, and then with residents that are fully vaccinated, we're still sitting at number 15. And then a county standpoint, we've reached a cumulative case count of over 248,000 people testing positive with COVID-19. That's another 30,000 just in the last week. And so that's down at least from 35,000 a week ago, but we still have a lot of people that are being exposed and having to quarantine, having basically changing their lives, whether or not that's, kids or parents. So it's been very difficult. We're still having people pass away with COVID. We had another 10 in the last week. So we're at 1,961 deaths from COVID in the county. And then on the positive note, 93% of those 18 and over are fully vaccinated. So 93%, just that's amazing. You know, it's the best in the county, or best in the nation for counties of our size. And 61% of those that are eligible for the booster have already received it. So, you know, we're doing very well as far as getting people boosted also. You know, I continue to do lots of advocating for our city, you know, especially at the county level. You know, I talk to our county health and county supervisors, seems like at least every week, on whatever issues or getting testing in our, you know, getting testing or vaccination pop-up sites in our city. There was a vaccination site at Columbia Neighborhood Center last weekend. And, you know, the testing is now happening, you know, every month in our city on the first and third Thursday. So it's at the Sunnyvale Community Center. They were here yesterday. They'll be back on February 3rd and February 17th. So they're here from 9:30 to 4 p.m. And, you know, you just go to sccfreetest.org and you can get an appointment. Those appointments open basically about a week ahead of the actual date. So they'll open Friday for the following Thursday. So you can do that, or, you know, there's lots of places around the county. So if you go to sccfreetest.org, you can see all the places around the county where you can get tested. And similarly, you can go to sccfreevax.org if you still need to get vaccinated, to get your flu shot, get boosted. So there's lots of drop-in locations around the county as far as getting your vaccination. Let's go ahead and talk about some upcoming events. You know, the book sale for the Friends of the Sunnyvale Library that was supposed to happen last weekend was postponed until February 12th and 13th. And that's all because of COVID and having lots of people inside. So it really made sense from that standpoint for the safety of the Friends of the Library, as well as everyone that always goes to purchase so many books. And then, of course, there are multiple grand openings coming up in February, as you know, as well, all these are outdoor events, but as what we're expecting to see we've kind of reached a peak from a COVID-19 Omicron standpoint, and we should see numbers starting to trail off. But several restaurants are planning to have grand openings in downtown Sunnyvale. Burma Taste is having theirs on February 10th. Shosha, which is the new Indian restaurant, is planning to have their grand opening on February 11th. First National Bank, which is a new bank at McKinley and McKinley on City Line, right near Matilda, is planning to have their grand opening on February 15th. And then the Sunnyvale Downtown Association finally actually has an office in downtown after many, many years. And that's planned to be, their opening is February 22nd. And then, of course, let's see, there's other, I think that's it for grand openings. But there's lots of council meetings coming up, you know, and other meetings. You know, our redistricting commission, which has met several times in the last week, they will have another chance for community feedback on map preferences at a workshop on Thursday, February 10th at 6 p.m. And then if you want more information on redistricting, of course, you can always go to sunnyvale.ca.gov/redistricting. And then council has our next regular meeting next Tuesday, and it has several things on the agenda, one of which is the recognition of outgoing mayor or outgoing Vice Mayor Glenn Hendricks, and the ceremonial oath of office for Vice Mayor Cisneros. So that was chosen. We chose a new vice mayor at the beginning of January. Lots of things on our agenda. We'll review the calendar year 2021 neighborhood and community grants. So these are grants that we give to neighborhood associations to run small events to kind of build that camaraderie amongst the neighborhoods, and then community grants that we use from a city standpoint to fund a lot of big events that kind of are citywide. So that's, you know, the some of the downtown music that you have. So it's like the tree lighting and downtown music events that the Downtown Association does. There's the Historical Society is doing an event next summer or this coming summer to highlight kind of the history of Sunnyvale. It's the pet parade. So there's a lot of community events that those grants end up funding. And then we'll also receive and file the comprehensive financial report for our last fiscal year, so the 2020-2021 report, and get that report from our independent auditors. We had about $9 million more in revenue than we expected, and about $6 million less in expenditures. So after we kind of backfill some of our reserves and pay some of the additional expenses, we and kind of fill in some of our funds, we have about a $12 million balance for reappropriation. So that staff report just came out yesterday. So I've been working with the city manager on possibilities on how that money could be used. And so we'll see what the final recommendations are, and that'll be coming up on Tuesday. And then our all-day strategic session will be happening next Thursday. It was supposed to be in person with Omicron, but now will be remote. And so that's actually one of the good things. It's one of our big 3 all-day meetings from a council standpoint. I was hoping that would be in person so that we could have a little more interaction between, council, so kind of more of a team building event, as well as more interaction between city staff, our directors and council, being able to ask questions. And, it helps just having lunch together and, having breaks together to just talk about, general things, which, we have lots of meetings, but they're all kind of focused on specific topics. And then, and that's open to the public if you want to attend. It's actually good. In the morning, we get updates on that strategic session. We get updates on kind of operations around the city. And then we talk about certain topics that a lot of times we don't get a chance to talk about from a council standpoint. And so we'll be sitting down and everybody will be zooming in for those meetings. So join if you get a chance. And then in early February, actually the last day of January and February 2nd or February 3rd, we'll be having 2 nights of interviewing someone to fill Mason Spong's empty position when he vacated his council member seat back in November. And so ultimately we had 10 applicants. So we have a good mix of applicants that applied, and we'll ultimately be appointing someone on February 9th, as far as memory serves. But ultimately, it's good from that standpoint to have, a mixture of people with experience on council and just people wanting to get more involved in the community. And it'll be good to hear, what their stance is, and, and go through an interview process as far as that's concerned before we appoint our replacement council member. I'm hoping we would have never had to say that after going through the study, after going through the process of changing our basically changing our charter so that we could appoint, because I was initially a council member put on city council because of a special election, and that was because the way our charter was written previously, that we couldn't appoint. We just basically had to run a special election unless it was relatively close to the actual election day. But we have our first council appointment far sooner than what we expected. So that being said, happy that at least we have the chance to save the city from $250,000 to $3 million, depending upon what the process would have been. Many people have asked, so let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. Many people have asked, what's going on with the crows? what is the city doing? Why is there so much news? And I've also received, tons of suggestions and complaints, of course, from around the county, from around the country on what Sunnyvale should do about the crows. So yeah, definitely there's been lots of press on Sunnyvale's crow problem over the last 2 weeks. I never thought the story would get, so much legs, and I think it's mainly in talking to some of the reporters. It's because, it wasn't COVID, it wasn't politics. It was kind of the perfect intersection of an animal story and high tech, especially with Silicon Valley. And it's, of course, the city trying to fix things to help, to basically improve public health and make sure that we're trying to get rid of a nuisance. Although, it's been done by other cities. And so, I've been working with the city manager for the last few years in dealing with kind of the issues of feces from the crows downtown, on our sidewalks, in our parks, on the street. And we've had them spray washed, and it's been kind of just reactive. And we've had to do it pretty much year round for the last 2 years. Worse in the wintertime, but even in the summertime, the amount of feces there has been sometimes really bad. In late November, I took the possible solution of using the green laser pointers to the city manager, and staff is finally going to start a pilot program next week to try to get them to disperse. And so it's a mixture of things. It's not just the green lasers, which that's the other thing. It's like people are like, don't use the green lasers, and I would have never guessed that so many news stations would want to run the story. After being on the front of the Merc, then the local stations, the local news stations, all ran reports about it, ran interviews. We now have CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, all doing stories on the crows. And the stories even getting mentioned on late night talk shows, with Kimmel and Colbert talking about our Sunnyvale City crow problem. But the program does start next week, and staff is looking at utilizing not just the green laser pointers, but it's a mixture of playing sounds of crows in distress, hanging crow effigies, although that has limited success, and then just having staff out there with a green laser pointer to kind of scare them away. Hopefully, I'm hoping that this will be successful in alleviating the issue. We don't want the crows to completely go away. It's just we don't want them to congregate in the hundreds in one specific place and be a big nuisance. It would be wonderful if we could just reason with them to say, go hang out over here or there, a place that would be, a little bit or in smaller numbers in different locations, but just having so many in one location has been, really a health hazard. And that's one of the reasons why we've had, people spray washing the sidewalks. And we've also gotten complaints, of course, on that how dare you waste water during a drought, spray washing sidewalks. So sometimes the city can't win, but hopefully what we're doing will actually be successful, and we'll have the crows go away, or at least kind of relocate to, throughout the city a little bit and spread, in different neighborhoods, or to some degree, find a new permanent roost that is a little more acceptable than where people are walking and trying to enjoy themselves in City Park. Tim asked what is happening with the Macy's parking lot. So ultimately, this is finally the city line development going forward in Block 3. So Block 3 is the area from Washington to McKinley and Murphy to Francis Street. Murphy to Tafe Street. And so that whole big block where the Redwood Square is, and they've kind of blocked off Redwood Square because that ultimately will be, a park, a park in final location. But they'll be kicking off the groundbreaking next week for what will go where Macy's is, which is 2 levels of underground parking, and then mixed use above all that area, which will be retail on the bottom with close to 500 apartments, as well as large, like 2 6-story buildings with office space. So retail along all the bottom of that to make that more of a community attraction, and then having a mixture of office. But the old Macy's parking lot has been split in half. The southern half of that is basically for staging. So that'll be a staging area for all the construction workers, for parking for the construction workers, as well as any equipment and all that will be in that area, because they can't, especially as they're digging out that area where the underground parking will be. It's going to take a lot of additional equipment and trucks going through and all that. So you will see a lot of effort starting up in the next week, but there's still plenty of parking downtown, and so you'll still start seeing some additional social media on where you can park downtown. I parked underneath Plaza del Sol, so underneath where we're seeing all the crows last week. So there's always parking there. And then, there are multiple parking lots, just east of the old Macy's parking lot. There's a city lot there. There's several lots at Evelyn and Carroll, Evelyn and Sunnyvale, Evelyn and Francis. So lots of parking lots along that area where people can park. And you still have the parking garages that are part of the City Line project that are barely used. So all that's available for those looking for parking. I know people always try to park as close as possible. So it definitely will. I've already been hearing some worries and complaints about those people wanting to go to the farmers market or shop on Murphy Avenue, but everything is still open, and definitely, come downtown. There is parking. There's plenty of space. Heather asked, are there any updates on what's happening with the massive retail space formerly occupied by Orchard Supply? Is the area being redeveloped? So I've seen several preliminary plans for apartments and retail on the site, but it's really pending finishing the El Camino Real specific plan. So that is considered kind of part of that El Camino Real area, even though it doesn't actually front on El Camino Real. But what we did is we're currently going through, about to release a draft EIR that kind of redoes the evaluation for retail and housing along that whole corridor. We want to have mixed use, so we want to have a certain amount of housing, but we don't want to lose that retail component, that sales tax dollars for the city. And so, it's been several years, but we're finally working on the update to that specific plan, and that's moving forward quickly. That we'll release the draft EIR, and sometime later this year, we'll finally approve the specific plan update. And at that point, a lot of the kind of pending proposals for different sites, and the OSH is the old OSH is one of them, that will go forward. Carrie asked, actually, and others asked, of course, any word on when Target is expected to reopen? So the positive news is I talked to City Line reps last week, and the decision is being, of course, made for Target at Target's headquarters in Minneapolis. But the official date is scheduled currently for Sunday, February 6th. Once the store is fully stocked and staffed, that might move up a little bit, but right now it's February 6th, which is, a few weekends away. So it's Sunday, but maybe it'll be a little bit earlier. We're hoping, but everybody will be happy to have Target again open here in Sunnyvale, and a lot of people even from neighboring cities have told me that they love coming to our Target. So hopefully that will happen relatively soon. Jenny asked, any idea when Roadrunner Sports will be opening at the City Line project? So they started an online campaign about 2 weeks ago. The sign went up last week and this week, and they started stocking their store. This week, actually, the store opened. So the store is officially open. If you need, running gear, you need new running shoes, they're open on McKinley. You can go visit them. So definitely take a visit, say hi. But they are officially open, and we'll see when their official grand opening is. But their soft opening already happened. Go take a visit. Eric asked, when is Pacific Catch opening? So I did confirm it's sometime in 2022. There's no date yet. Most likely the fall. They've started their interior design, but they haven't, moved forward yet. And I think it's a little bit tied to COVID, but and things opening up. My guess is, and I think we'll start seeing in the spring, things really start opening up, kind of post-pandemic or whatever that new normal is. But so they're starting their interior design for their site. Manzano asked, any status on when the Urban Plate is opening? So that's just down the street on McKinley from Pacific Catch, which is right across from the Target. No, so there's not a date yet, but they have put up their sign, and the City Line representatives said that they started work on their interior design build out. So let's hope that opens relatively soon. But what I've seen is it should be sometime in the summer. So they'll start, they're finalizing their interior design. They'll then do the build out, and then it should be sometime in the summer when that finally opens. Let's see if I have any additional questions. If I can find the right window. No, let's see. Okay, let's see. That's interesting. Facebook is giving me problems. So I guess we won't have any, oh wait, finally. Very concerned about, so Shane asked, very concerned about the state's position on solar. They're currently planning on a fee that is going to crush solar's benefits and will most likely hurt solar adoption. Yeah, I've been talking to multiple state legislatures exactly on that. That from a standpoint of basically, it's been incentivized for a while now to put solar on your homes, but the PUC basically kind of gave in to certain PG&E demands, and this is always a question with the California PUC to kind of disincentivize it, to make it less, to basically charge homeowners for when they're producing solar. And from my standpoint, I do think that that's something that our state reps can push the PUC on, basically reevaluate, have them reevaluate. And the governors, that's also been a lot of lobbying at the governor level to make sure that those incentives don't go away, and making sure that solar is here to stay. But let's see what happens. But from that standpoint, not much we can do, but I'm doing what I can from an advocacy standpoint to try to do that. Shane said, I saw the list of applicants for Mason's seat online. It was nice to see that all the names of former council members seeking the opportunity to serve. So we had 2 past mayors, Jim Griffith and Tony Spitaleri, both served up as well, hoping the council considers someone has sat in the seat before for a short appointment, and that is part of the issue. Whoever we appoint, I think, needs to hit the ground running. They'll be there for less than 11 months on city council, and the learning curve to actually be productive on council does take a while. When you're newly appointed or newly elected, normally you're not normally appointed to be on council. This will be the first time in a while that we've actually done that, but our charter was changed years ago to make it so that that a special election was was the fair way to fill an empty seat, unless it's a short period of time. And so hopefully we in council talked about that at the very beginning of this process of what we would like to see. And that was one of the criteria that several council members mentioned, that we wanted people with a certain amount of expertise and how to deal with city staff, a certain amount of decorum, as opposed to learning how to work with council and how to work with all the players on city staff. So I think having at least several past council members in the mix, and especially past mayors, is worthwhile from a council standpoint as we decide what can do. And Heather asked the target grand opening. So the target reopening should be Sunday, February 6th. So looking forward to that, as so many others are. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. Omicron and COVID continues to hit our community, our state, our country. I just want you all to know that no matter what the challenges we face, I'm always proud of our city and our response to COVID. And I'm thankful for our fantastic residents who want to help others and just want to serve our community in so many ways. And whether or not it's bringing new ideas forward or helping pick up trash, helping those unhoused, providing food, providing blankets. It's just fantastic how our residents give back. New issues always come up every week, but your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We are in this together. We will get through this together. So thanks for listening. Have a great week. Goodbye. Take care. Good night.